These events are the single most powerful moments you have to be able to create change for yourself.
Mm. Can we create our own luck? In this episode of the Happy Accidents podcast, I sit down with Adam Tank, author of the book Luck by Design, and he gives his recipe for how you can create a luckier life. Hey there, friends. This is Dennis Geelen, author of the Happy Accidents newsletter and the book The Accidental Solopreneur. Welcome to another episode of the Happy Accidents podcast, where we dive into true stories of wildly successful people, products, or businesses, all of which can trace their success back to a chance encounter, a serendipitous event, or a fluke invention. In each episode, we unravel the tales of unexpected triumphs and the remarkable journeys that led to their incredible success. I'm on a mission to explore the fascinating world of happy accidents, and I'm thrilled to have you along for the ride. So, why should you tune in? Well, besides the entertainment value of these incredible stories, there's a hidden treasure trove of lessons we can learn from them. Whether you're an entrepreneur, a creative mind, or simply someone who enjoys a good narrative, this podcast is your go-to source for inspiring stories and valuable insights. Get ready for a roller coaster of surprises, a dash of luck, and a sprinkle of wisdom. This is the Happy Accidents podcast, where success meets serendipity. Let's jump into today's adventure. Well, I am super excited to have this guy on the podcast today. He is the author of the new Amazon best-selling book, Luck by Design, and has some incredibly interesting views on the subject. But there's so much more behind this guy. You've got such a cool background and some fascinating stories to share. So, Adam Tank, welcome to the Happy Accidents podcast.
Thank you, Dennis. It was serendipitous that we were connected through someone I didn't even know on LinkedIn who was like, hey, there's a guy out there who's writing or talking about very similar concepts to you. So you two have to connect. So I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, serendipity at play already, and we're just getting started here. So, for those in the audience just getting to know you for the first time, tell us a bit about you and your background.
So I'm a huge geek by nature. I was a microbiologist early in my career, transitioned into becoming an entrepreneur as a tech, so hardware and software guy, and have focused much of my career in the water industry. So right now, building software to help design water and wastewater treatment systems. On a personal level, I'm a bio dad. I say biological father because I'm also a foster father. One girl, one daughter. She's 17 months. It's been amazing to watch her grow up so quickly. And then I live in Kansas City, so Midwestern, born and raised, but have lived all over the US and all over the world too. So enjoy travel, enjoy getting outside of my comfort zone. And then have recently written and published this book, which is a whole nother, call it chapter of life. It's been pretty exciting. So excited to dig in with you.
Yeah. And as I was saying right before we jumped on here, I just finished reading the book, and as I was going through, I just find myself nodding and going, "Yep, yep. Oh, this is a great story for the podcast. Oh, I got to ask him about that." So I'm excited to have you here and dig into that. But before we dig into the topic of luck and the book for a second, can you just tell me, how did you get into microbiology? How did that all
Mm.
first start?
I call it, so we're going to talk about this, I assume, what I call catalyst events in the book that you probably refer to as happy accidents.
Yep.
And the catalyst for me was actually, it was in elementary school. I don't remember what grade, but it was young elementary, like maybe third, fourth grade. And a teacher did a simple hand washing experiment. And we had these little petri dishes full of, I believe it was instant potatoes. And so we mixed up these instant potatoes, we put them in these petri dishes, and then the teacher had us go and do hand washing. And so some kids didn't wash their hands at all. Some kids washed their hands with just water, some with soap and water. And then we, put like a Q-tip on our hands and put it in this petri dish. And then we looked at what grew. And I just remember seeing the stuff that grew on these plates, thinking like, oh my God, this is unbelievable. I didn't even know this stuff existed. And so then I think I went home and my parents bought me a little kid's microscope, and it really just went from there. So for me, it was something that happened to me that I had no control over, but I ended up loving and sort of carried through, obviously throughout college and then early career.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was the start of it.
Mhm. And this is going to be the theme of a lot of the stuff we talk about today. And this is why I wanted to start with that story, because it set a trajectory for your life,
Correct.
right? So many things could have happened differently. You could have been sick that day and totally missed that day at school. You may never have gotten introduced to the subject. You may never have gone down that road or fallen in love with it or even realized it's something that you enjoy or want to fall in love with. But here you are so many years later, and that one class on that day kind of, it was a catalyst that set you
Yes.
in that
Yes.
direction, right? So
Yes.
we're gonna dig into many more catalysts, many more stories here, and obviously your take on luck. But there's another story from your book. This was the one that kind of blew my mind, and I
Hmm.
want to dig into. And this was the one where you got off the bus at the wrong stop in a
Yep.
foreign country,
Yes.
and that also had a major impact on your life. I don't want to give away all the stories from the book. We're not going to touch on them all, but this one I really want you to kind of share, because it's a jumping off point from, okay, you got into microbiology because of that class back in public
Hmm.
school, and then take it from there. This is now years later. You're, in your
Yes.
early 20s.
Yeah.
What happened here?
I'm like, in some ways I'm hesitant to share all the stories, and other ways I'm like, there are a ton of stories, so it's not going to ruin the book for anyone
Right.
that wants to read
Yeah.
it. And they're not they're not all my own, obviously. In fact, most of the
Yep.
stories in there are from either
Yeah.
famous or famous people or people that I know that are in my network. So in any case, this won't ruin it for you if you are interested in reading the book, whoever's listening to this. But when I was 23, I had an opportunity to move to Brazil and work for a small business down there as a quality engineer, which I had transitioned into as a career, sort of out of or with microbiology, because the absence or presence of bacteria make a significant impact on the safety of food. And I was going to work on a Saturday morning, and I didn't realize that the buses ran different routes on weekends. So they didn't stop at their normal stops. They like maybe skipped every other one or something like that. And so I wasn't paying much attention. I noticed the bus went past my normal stop, and I thought, no big deal, right? It'll stop somewhere close to my original stop and I'll just walk the rest of the way on foot. And so I got off at this next stop and started walking in the direction of what I thought was going to be the business that I was working at. And come to find out, I was lost like 5, 10 minutes in. My phone didn't have GPS at the time. And so I'm walking through this, what ended up becoming, or what is or was one of the most dangerous favelas in Rio. So for those that don't know, favela is it's a term used in Brazil to sort of describe these heavily populated, sort of loosely governed areas, typically right along the boundaries of major cities, and they're often super corrupt, a lot of violent activity, gang activity, corrupt police activity, etc. And of course, here I am, like the whitest guy in probably 100 miles, walking through
And
the
how
middle of
old
this
were you?
favela.
Sorry.
23,
23. Okay.
23. Yeah, and I'm in my khakis and a polo, right? Like walking around, and I'm an idiot. Anyways, so I'm walking
Way out of
through.
place.
Yes, correct. I'm walking through this favela, and I'm sweating. It's hot as hell. Like I clearly have no idea where I'm going. And I get pulled aside by this street vendor who has one of these little makeshift carts. If you've been to sort of an emerging market, you've definitely walked across these. Just think of any sort of street vendor, even in the States. If you go to, like a think about like a food truck as an example, something of that size. And he pulled me aside and he started talking to me, and he basically said, like, hey, you shouldn't be, this is all in Portuguese, and my Portuguese was mediocre at the time, but I was picking up enough to understand what he was saying. And he's like, hey, you really shouldn't be here. Call whoever it is you need to come and get you. Until then, you can hang out here at my truck, and right, we'll talk about whatever. So we got to talking, and he's got pictures of his family up behind him hanging in his food truck. And he was talking about how proud he was of his kids who had gone on to do, in his mind, bigger and better things. So they left the favela, they went on to go to school. I think one became a doctor, right? There were a bunch of careers that they all pursued. And it struck me, without him having to say it, it struck me that he was an entrepreneur. He was a small business person. I had never been an entrepreneur prior to that. But what struck me was that I realized that entrepreneurship wasn't just about making money. Clearly, he was supporting his family, but he wasn't out there to make $1 billion. He was running a food truck or running a small cart in the middle of a favela in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. But most important thing was he was able to support his family so that they could then go on to do bigger and better things. So for him, entrepreneurship was a means to supporting his community, supporting his family. And so that really stuck with me. And it made me realize that I wanted to become an entrepreneur or a small business owner to be able to help, the community, to be able to help the world, to be able to do
Mm,
much more than just make money. Although certainly if you're running a business, that is a goal, no doubt. And
yeah.
that has carried through with me to this day. So again, another example of a catalyst event that I could not have
Hmm.
controlled that happened to
Yeah.
me that just struck me and changed the course of my career.
Yeah. First of all, I can just imagine your heart rate as you get off on the wrong stop and you're walking through there. But second of all, I just love how you're able to go back and pinpoint these different points in your life and go, that's what set me in this direction. That was
Hmm.
the catapult that got me there. When was it that you kind of really started looking into this idea of chaos and luck and randomness and digging into that further and then pinpointing these different
Yeah.
catalysts in
You
your
know,
life?
I've read a lot of I mean just a lot of books generally. Like you, right behind you, you've got your shelf full of books. I have mine all over the place scattered on my desk too. And I read a lot of call it like self-help or motivational books in my late teens, early 20s. I dug into a lot of books like The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell, The Black Swan by Nassim Taleb, stuff from the Heath brothers, Adam Grant, all these authors who the way that they write and the way that they blend science or academia with reality really fascinated me. And I think it was a swirling of all of these different principles that sort of just sat in my mind. And as I started to think back to those moments that you're referring to, Dennis, of the ones that really put me on a certain trajectory, I realized that all of my moments are anecdotal, but as I talk to all my friends, they also have very similar moments or stories. And most certainly I know you do because you've coined this happy accidents term and we can study these things because they happen all the time. And so I was thinking there has to be more to this than just anecdotal stories. This happens so frequently with so many people.
Mm.
This can't just be a fluke. Like these can't just be, random things that happen and it's just like, oh, that's kind of cool, and you don't really give it much more thought. So I really wanted to apply a scientific lens to all of this. So I reflected on my own moments. I started studying moments from famous people, moments from my friends. I applied some of the concepts from those books that I had just referred to you. And the culmination is this book I just wrote now, Luck by Design.
And it's so cool because when you and I were first introduced to each other serendipitously, we started chatting back and forth, and I was asking you some of these questions to see, like, would this guy be a good,
Right.
guest on the podcast? And you started naming a lot of the books and telling me your story, and I'm like, oh my goodness, that's my story, and oh my goodness, I have each one of those books and those authors on
Yep.
this bookshelf behind me. I'm like, I got to talk to this guy because
Yes,
we even though we probably have very very different lives and have taken different paths, we've kind of come to the same conclusions.
that's right.
We've been influenced by a lot of the same writers, and we now have a very similar thinking on how this world works. So cool to just sit here and jam with you on the topic of luck. But one thing I want to dive in a little bit with you is there's another book by another author that just came out earlier this year called Fluke,
Okay.
and the author's name is Brian Klaas, and he kind of subscribes to the theory that this is all just fluke. This is all
Mm,
just random.
mm,
And what I would call happy accident, what would you would call a catalyst, he calls a contingent event.
okay.
And he says basically every single thing that happens throughout the day are potential contingent events that could set your life on a completely different trajectory, some big way, some small way. And he kind of frames it as there's two worldviews. There's the worldview of convergence, saying or believing you're destined to be what you are. This person was born to be a movie star. This person was destined to be the next, big rock singer. This person was destined to be the next scientist. And things are going to happen, and your life is going to converge in that way. The other school of thought or the other worldview is no, everything is just a contingent event, and things that happen to us just happen to take us in certain directory or
Mm,
certain trajectories.
mm-hmm,
We didn't plan it that way. You know, God or the universe was not having this plan in mind for us. It was all these little decisions or accidental things that happened to us that took us in that direction. Do you land in one of those camps or somewhere in the middle, or with everything that you've kind of looked into, what's your thinking on convergence versus contingency?
yeah, I would say that that what I what I believed before I wrote the book, and then certainly what I believe now, having looked at the research, the science behind these things, is that you call them contingent events, call them happy accidents, call them catalysts. These, I would agree with Klaus that these things happen all the time. And the reason that they happen all the time is because this is the only way that life continues as we know it. So life is contingent upon growth. It's contingent upon change. It's contingent
Mm.
upon, um, call it randomness. Where I land on the convergence component is that it's up to us then to choose what to do with these moments when they happen. So we can't control the moments that happen, but we can control a response to these
Yeah,
moments.
yeah,
So I don't know that I would subscribe to the fact that this person was always meant to be a movie star. But most definitely, if you put yourself in a position to become one, and then one of these happy accidents or catalysts happen to you that you then take advantage of to further your efforts or further your aims, then you're in a much better position to then become a movie star.
yeah. And again, we're very aligned there because what I have kind of discovered after researching all these different what I call happy accident stories and writing about them in my newsletter and now telling them here on the podcast is they seem to all follow this three stage act. Stage one, the person is doing something to set the stage for unexpected opportunities to come their way.
Mm-hmm.
They're getting out there. They're trying new things. They're testing new ideas. They're meeting new people. They're not just sitting on the couch watching Netflix. They're out there, what I call increasing their luck surface area, right? They don't know what opportunities are going to come their way, and they don't know when. They don't know what they're going to look like, but they're increasing the chances by doing stuff, right? And then this unexpected thing lands in their lap. I call it a happy accident. But that's not where the story ends. That's only stage two. Stage three of the act is, well, they first have to recognize that
Correct.
opportunity and
Correct.
then seize it, capitalize on it. And you see all kinds of different stories where a person doesn't even recognize the opportunity and the
Mm-hmm.
story ends there. Ah, luck never happens to me. I wish that would happen. Well, it did. You just didn't even recognize it, right? Or they do a really poor job of capitalizing on it. Maybe they're not equipped. Maybe they don't have the experience or the skill set to take this new opportunity and run with it. So again, end of the story for them. And we see that 90% of new businesses fail, right? It's a great idea. It's a great opportunity. You just weren't equipped or didn't know how to, really seize that opportunity. But the stories we hear about are the ones where all three stages of that
Yeah.
act fall into place. And it's like, wow, that's how Spanx was created. Sarah Blakely just fell upon this idea and it was a happy accident, but she had the smarts and the ambition and the motivation and the boldness to run with it. And some other happy accidents had to fall in place in order for Spanx to become this wildly successful company. And we see so many examples of that. So I think we're definitely aligned in our
Very
thinking
much
there.
so. Very much so.
Yeah.
In fact, the way that I broke the book up is in three parts. And the first part is exactly what you're referring to, Dennis, which is that you have to recognize these moments when they happen. And so the
Mhm.
part one is called the catalyst effect, which actually was the original title of the book before I did some market
Mm.
research. So it's about recognizing, hey, these things happen all the time, but you have to recognize it when it happens. Because
Yeah.
if you don't, that moment passes by and you're never going to get it back. That's not to
Yeah.
say that there's not going to be a lot more that come down the pipe, but yes, that's the first
Yeah.
part. The second part is then, okay, what do you do with it when you recognize it. And notice that a lot of times the moment preceding a catalyst event or a happy accident, there's a lot of turbulence. There's a lot of turmoil there because you're out there, you're trying different things, you're trying to make things work. Maybe something bad is going on in your life. And so you're kind of in the state of flux. And what we find is that when you're in that state of flux, your mind is much more open to being hit by one of these moments so that you can then take advantage of it. So that's the second part. And then the third part is, okay, once you realize it and you see it's happening and you're actively trying to take advantage, how do you create sort of lasting change for yourself, or maybe more importantly for other people, by
Mhm.
taking advantage of these things? So
Mhm.
I mean, yeah, we're right in line with one another, no
Yeah,
question.
love it. Um, Another thing you mentioned in the book is the past cannot accurately predict the future.
Yes,
You
yes,
want to expand on that a little bit?
yes, yeah. So there's this wonderful passage from Nassim Taleb. He talks about this concept of the Thanksgiving turkey. And so there's, so you think about the life of a turkey, at least a domesticated turkey for that matter.
Hmm.
The turkey lives a very happy life. It gets up roughly the same time every morning. It does its little routine. It ruffles its feathers. It gets fed roughly the same time every day. It goes around maybe scratching through the farmyard. It's, trying to find a mate, do these things. And this happens for many, many days. Could be a year, 2 years, whatever it is. And then all of a sudden, you have this repeatable pattern of what's going to happen in this case, the turkey's life. But I would argue the same thing applies to us. We get up, we wake up, our alarm wakes us up, we go to work, we eat breakfast, we play with our kids, we do the same thing, we answer emails, we right maybe have a hobby, and then we go to bed, and it's life on repeat. So we assume that the future then will also be that life on repeat. Just like the turkey would assume that the next day it's going to get fed and be fat and happy. Well, of course, the Tuesday morning before Thanksgiving rolls around, that day is not at all the same as all of the preceding days. And
Hmm.
so there's this concept that he calls the round trip fallacy, which means that we believe that this trip that we've been on is going to continue to be the trip that we go on. But as I end that chapter in the book, or at least end that passage, I talk about maybe you realize that tomorrow won't be the same as the farmer drags you behind the barn with an axe in his hand to the tree stump because you're going to get served on a platter on Thanksgiving night.
Yeah.
And the story to me is very illustrative because we often fall into the fallacy that because we've seen a repeatable, predictable pattern, that means that the future is also going to be predictable and repeatable. But that's simply not the case. We think
Hmm.
that because it's been predictable, that there won't be an event of chance that happens that changes our lives. But that is a very different, philosophy than realizing that these moments happen all the time. And in fact, things do change very drastically. So for people listening, and I'm curious for you, Dennis, like we talk about these events, if you think back to the moments in time that radically change the course of your life, and these could be for better, for worse, by the way. So the book has a lot of what we'll call more negative events, although there's certainly positive ones. Winning the lottery is an example, thing that happened with Charlize Theron, all these different things. You realize that we can't predict where our lives are going to end up as much as we try. And as much as we
Hmm.
even try to control it, we really have
Yeah.
absolutely no idea.
Right.
So the
And
important thing is to embrace, like, you have to embrace these things, because if you
yes.
try to fight against it, we find that, and in the book, it talks about the science says like we are really good at reestablishing a baseline. So whether you have won the lottery and you swing towards right complete elation and your life has changed for the better, you will come back to baseline. Just like if you go through the worst possible event that has ever happened in your life or will ever happen in your life, you will swing back to baseline. It's just the way that humans are.
Mhm.
And so it's all about, taking whatever comes at you on either side
Yeah.
of that spectrum.
Yeah. First of all, love the example that Talib gives using the Thanksgiving turkey. Just, yes, you can see, oh, yes, this is a fallacy that we all run into. And you see this all the time in the business world. In fact, a huge, thing the last 10, 15 years has been big data. Let's collect all this data
Mm,
about our customers, about all these transactions, about all these trends, and that's going to help us better predict the future or make better decisions for the future. But what we don't realize is there's so many things outside of our control, and there's so many black swans out there that you're still going to get caught off guard. And it's this need I think we have to want to control things, to want to understand things, and we fool ourselves into thinking if we just know as much as we can about the past, our company, I'm putting this in the terms of
Right.
business and
Right.
entrepreneurs, our company is going to be safe in the future. And that's
Correct.
just such a fallacy. Um, you see it with the weather. How much data do we now have about weather? And yet you cannot accurately predict beyond a couple of days what the weather is going to be like in San Diego next Tuesday, right? You just can't. But we fool ourselves into thinking, and we get mad at the weatherman. He said it wasn't going to rain on
That's
Tuesday, and
right.
it rained on Tuesday. Like we have to wake up to the fact that the past just cannot accurately predict the future. Not to say we shouldn't try, not to say there's some merit in that, but placing 100% of our trust in data from the past is a poor way to kind of predict the future and to run our business. So you mentioned we have to accept and lean into this idea of uncertainty. What does that look like? First of all, accepting it is one thing. What do we do with the fact that, okay, there's just random events that are going to happen
Yeah,
and
sure.
we have to be ready for it? What do you do if you're an entrepreneur? How do you do that?
Yeah, it's about reinvention. So the companies that survive for decades, if not centuries, are in a constant state of reinvention. They're never resting on their laurels. They're introducing new products, they're going into new markets, they are acquiring new businesses. It's this constant state of flux and change and growth and failure and all these things that most business people are scared about. You
Mm,
don't want your business to fail. You want it to be safe and secure. You want to have your next paycheck, right? You want to be that turkey that's fed every day, or in this case, every 2 weeks, whatever your standard paycheck schedule is. But in reality, the only way to ensure that that's happening is to embrace the fact that these black swan events do exist. And maybe even more importantly, those black swan events are the things that can take your business to the next level. It's not just about survival, it's
yeah.
about thriving. So as a
Hmm.
simple example, if you notice that I don't, in today's day and age, we could talk about AI being the next big thing that's going to radically transform businesses. In my world, we have people fighting it tooth and nail because it goes against the way that they make money today. So I work with a lot of people who bill by the hour. And so if it took you 1,000 hours to do something, and now with AI, it only takes you 10, people are scared to death of that.
Yeah.
But in reality, if you choose to lean in and embrace the fact that this radical disruption is happening, you can take your business to the next level, blow out all of your competition,
Hmm.
completely reframe the way that you deliver value to your customers, and think totally differently about this equation. And that's how you do it. That is how you take advantage of these things.
Yeah. You mentioned that it's our human nature to want to get back to baseline.
Right.
I wonder if, and I want your take on this. I wonder if, so startup companies, they're innovative, they're testing new ideas, but their goal is to get to baseline. Let's get a company that's working. We got customers, we got, recurring revenue, we've got a mechanism. Once a company gets to a certain point, a business grows, and boy, we've got this figured out. Have they fooled themselves into thinking, okay, now we're at baseline and they're in a more dangerous place? And is that why we see some major companies fail? They get lulled into this baseline idea and they think they've made it.
I believe so. Yeah, I do believe so. You get so comfortable with process and bureaucracy and systems. Not to
Mm,
say those things aren't necessary, because they are. That's how you run a,
right,
a well-functioning business. But as we talk about growth and thriving, not just surviving, but a true business that's thriving and growing,
right.
it has to embrace disruption and change, and not you always have to fight the tendency to go back to baseline, to go back to the
Hmm.
middle, to go back to safety and security, because
Yeah,
that's what we want as humans. But the best businesses, that's not what they're doing. They're
right.
constantly evolving. They're constantly changing. They're constantly trying new things. Hate them or
Mm-hmm.
love them. You think about someone in today's day and age like Mark Zuckerberg, right? People are just lambasting him for the fact that he spent billions of dollars on this concept called the metaverse.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, billions of dollars. And whether or not it pans out, whether or not you think it's the greatest idea or the worst idea in the history of business, the guy is taking risk. He's taking shots. And as you alluded to in the beginning, Dennis, he's creating a surface area for luck for his business by doing this. Because if you don't do anything, you know what's going to happen. You're going to stay on baseline.
Yeah.
But if you're out there, I'm not a sports guy, by the way, but I find it funny to make a sports analogy. You can't possibly make a goal or make a basket or score a point if you're not actively hitting the puck or shooting the basketball. Even if you suck at it, the only way you're going to get there is if you're trying. And that's what Mark's doing. He's trying. And that's why Meta, I believe Meta is going to be is will continue to
Yeah.
be a fantastic company, continue
Yeah.
to grow.
And it's such a paradox, probably because as humans, we want our comfort zones, we want our baseline. So working at a company like that, you could feel this constant change, constant disruption. Maybe for certain people that's exciting for
Yes.
a certain period of time. But the majority of us want, I know what I'm doing, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. This is my job. This is the company. This is how we operate. And if you're in this company where you've got an innovative leader who's leaning into this uncertainty and trying to increase their luck surface area, and they do it in a way that is impacting your baseline, your comfort zone, you might not enjoy working at a company like that. But that company is not setting themselves up for success in the future if they're not doing those things. So there's this paradox of
Yeah.
I am doing the right thing, but my employees might not be enjoying it in the moment, right?
You
So
know, it's so funny because humans do want that predictable safety and security.
mhm,
And if you think about a company like Meta, Facebook, now Meta, Google, et cetera, the ones that seemingly have some of the best cultures in terms of business workplaces to be at, why do you think they provide 24/7 unlimited like great quality food and all these amazing healthcare benefits and childcare and I mean like anything you want basically. I've been to the Facebook campus. There's literally there at least there used to be like a concierge where you could go and say, "Hey, I'm having trouble. Can you help me do X?" And it doesn't matter what that is. You could say,
mhm.
"Hey, my kid is having trouble in school. Can you help?" And they'll say, "Yes, we'll find you the best tutor we can and we'll start
Wow.
tomorrow." No, right? No questions asked. And I have a feeling, obviously, a part of it is employee satisfaction, retention, getting people to work longer hours, right? All of those things that you might refer to. But I also think there's a part of them that's because it is so challenging from a fundamental principle point of view to work at a company like that because you're constantly being pulled in different directions and forced outside of your comfort zone, forced outside of comfort and safety. They're
Mhm.
providing those creature comforts
Right.
to keep you at that baseline of safety. I'm always going to
Yeah.
have food. I'm always going to have shelter. I'm going to
Mhm.
have healthcare. I'm going to be well taken care of from a paycheck point of view. So they're helping sort of, I don't know, bridge that gap between the cycle, like not having psychological safety with the basic fundamentals of just being taken care of from a physical point of view. And I think that makes a big difference at a place like that.
Yeah. It's brilliant actually when you think about it. Like we're not going to offer you a stable, this is what you do every day, 9 to 5. So we're going to give you some stability in a different way to
Exactly.
try and meet that
Exactly.
basic need that you have, right? Yeah,
Exactly.
I love that. What about you yourself? Um, you've taken a deep dive into this whole concept of chaos and luck. You understand these catalyst events, and you give tons of examples in the book. We touched on a couple, but wanted to leave a bunch for the audience to go and read the book and dive into more. What has that meant for you personally? Has that changed the way that you view your career, your life? What's going on for you in the last 10 years or so?
Yeah, I'd say I've become in many ways maybe not more open to these events happening, but certainly more cognizant of them.
Mm,
And I now have a maybe more and I might just be fooling myself here, but a more well-honed filter for what events can really propel me to the next, call it like plane in life that I'm trying to achieve. And
Mm,
so I've just become more like more sort of more in tune with the universe. I think I've become more trusting of my intuition and my gut, knowing that the science shows us that when you trust in your ability to take advantage of moments like these, you will find success, because that's literally the way that the universe is set up. That's how human nature works. It's what the science shows. So from
mm,
that point of view, I think I've become much more comfortable embracing the fact that there's a lot of randomness, a lot of stuff we can't control. And when you decide to take advantage of moments like these, really good things tend to happen.
mm.
I'm like, how do you feel about this, Dennis? Like, is it the same for you in your personal life, or certainly in your business, or some of the folks that you're coaching?
Yeah. It's been a massive shift for me because up until the age of 43, I was always just in a corporate job. I was extremely risk averse.
Hmm.
I was the typical, this is my comfort zone. I know what I'm doing. I'm getting my biweekly paycheck. I want to strive to do a good job. And I had some pretty good high paying jobs and had some senior positions in different companies, but not too far outside my comfort zone. That's enough for me. And then at the age of 43, I was laid off. So I was a catalyst.
Mm-hmm.
That shook my world. Like, but I thought this was the safe route I was taking.
Right.
So how is it possible that I'm now over here on the outside looking in? Totally shifted my thinking and thought, well, is it actually safer if I bet on myself? Now my future isn't in somebody else's hands. Yes, I have to build my own business. Yes, there's a ton of work there, but is that actually the safer route? And I started to go down that road with some encouragement from my wife. And I started to lose some of that risk aversion that I had. I still have tons of it. I'm a human. We want comfort, we want safety.
Right.
But as you mentioned, I kind of started to lean into, well, that seems like a good opportunity. Whereas in the past, it was be like, oh, that doesn't seem safe.
Well, what's funny is
Whereas,
when, as you were just talking, you said you pursued it because you thought it was the safer path.
yeah, yeah,
Right.
exactly. Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Is this safer? Like, will I be in control of my own destiny? Is it safer for
Right.
me to pursue this more risky path? Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. And it has opened my eyes though that boy, different opportunities keep coming your way. And in the past, I either didn't recognize them or I was too scared or anxious to take those opportunities. Now I just have to quickly analyze them when they come and say, does it make sense for me to take this opportunity? Not every opportunity is one that you need to take, or you're going to be
Hmm.
pulling yourself in 1,000 directions, right? So, which ones look like, oh boy, that one kind of fits my curiosity, my passion, might not be the exact path I'm on, but it fits with me. And I think that's a good opportunity for me to take right now. Whereas I never would have had that line of thinking 10 years ago. So,
That's amazing. And for the
yeah.
people that you work with and coach, I mean, do you bring these principles to that as well?
Yes, I help people really figure out where is their comfort zone, what's the border of that, and
Mm,
what do you think is right beyond that? What if we did a little bit? What if you networked with some different people instead of just the people you're comfortable networking with? What if you tried a different approach to marketing or selling your service? I know it's not your comfort zone, but what might happen if we try it? How can we do it in small doses? How can we test that out? You don't have to go full bang on it. That's never a good idea anyway. How can we test it out? And then you just start to get a little more, a little more, a little more comfortable with it. And then next thing you know, 6 months later, you're in a whole different spot. It's way outside your comfort zone of where it would have been today, but look where you are and look at all the opportunities it opened up for you. So,
hmm.
yeah.
Amazing.
Um, your wife runs a roller skating company, right? It's an
Yes,
e-commerce
yes,
shop. I think
yes.
it's called rollerskatenation.com, if I'm
That's right.
correct.
That's right.
So I want you to kind of share a little bit. Was there a happy accident that led her down that road? Was there a catalyst that took her in that direction? And how does she feel about being an entrepreneur and the fact that there's so many things outside of her control?
It's really interesting. I guess for her, so we were living in San Francisco when we met and when we got engaged, and yeah, and when we got married. So what? what happened was I was flying from San Francisco to New York City every week and literally felt like I was taking weeks off the end of my life every time I stepped on a plane because it's a brutal flight. It's like 5.5 going from west to east, and then probably 6 hours going from east to west. And she's from the Midwest. And I sort of threw out this idea like, hey, what if we move back to my hometown or my home turf? And it just so happened that the first big customer for this business that I co-founded was in Kansas City, which is my hometown. And she was open to it. So in
Mm,
some sense, I created a catalyst event by just suggesting that we move back to the Midwest. She
mhm.
embraced it, took advantage of it, came back here, and she had worked in e-commerce in San Francisco, was still doing some consulting for that old business, but was looking for e-commerce roles in the Kansas City area. And there just so happened to be this really old, I mean, maybe not really old, but older company called RC Sports. And like I had heard of it as a kid. I feel like RC skates or skating, like when you go to a roller rink, you get like these, sort of just clunky looking roller skates that almost every kid has worn probably at some point. And RC Sports was one of the biggest providers of these roller skates.
Right.
And she's like, you know what? I know nothing about roller skates, but why not give it a shot? So they hired her into the business to help out on the e-commerce side. And then really interestingly, COVID hit like right after she joined. And that was a huge catalyst for the business
Mhm.
because everyone and their mom wanted to start buying roller skates. They were spending more time at home, more time outside. People were spending the COVID paychecks they were getting, at least from the US government, on things like roller skates. And so the business exploded. So then she took over the e-commerce side of the house and has grown it just unbelievably since then. And has just sort of taken everything that's come her way. So, you get into the industry, you start to get sort of safe and comfortable knowing that everyone's buying skates, the business is booming, things are going really well. But for whatever reason, I think she has leaned into more of what her natural tendencies are, which are things like product development, creative marketing, um, advertising, social media, all of that kind of stuff, which has further propelled the business in ways that never would have happened before. And so there's
Mm.
a concept in the book I call a positive feedback loop,
Yeah.
which is exactly this. Like you hit a system with a catalyst, and instead of that system trying to go back to baseline, it actually like reinforces itself and goes into a new trajectory. Some cases the system completely dissipates because the energy was too much for it to handle. In other cases, it just creates something that you could have never anticipated prior. And in this case, they built a phenomenal e-commerce business on the back of COVID. And then, of course, my wife just leaning into her natural tendencies and creating this loop for them.
Yeah. Yeah, that one fascinated me when you got into that part in the book, the positive feedback loop, because there's some
Yes.
tangible stuff there that we can say, oh, okay, I don't control chance, I don't control the future, but I have some influence over sending this stuff in a positive direction. So I think people reading the book are going to get a ton out of that section. Um, there's so many stories in the book. We touched on a couple, but I mean, you got the Coco Chanel story, you got
Oh
the Charlize
man.
Theron story
Yep.
that you mentioned.
Yep.
There's your chapstick story. So many different things that people are going to enjoy reading and learn from. But for the listeners here on the podcast, what are two or three tips that you would have for leaning into and mastering uncertainty?
I would say so first is understand that change is baked into the fabric of the universe. And so there are always moments that are happening to you that you cannot control that if you realize the power of those moments when they're happening, it can get you to again the next plane in life that you're trying to achieve or the next thing that you're trying to accomplish. And it's very difficult to accomplish that next thing or get yourself out of your funk or overcome trauma that you may have experienced or whatever wherever you are in life. These events are the single most powerful moments you have to be able to create change for yourself.
Mm, mm,
So that's the first thing is just really take time, step back and think about what's happened in the past to you, what moments happened to get you where you are today. And then every day, just sort of kind of listen, just pay attention to what the universe is throwing at you. So it could be, you mentioned like if you're sitting on the couch watching Netflix, chances are you're not increasing your surface area for luck enough that something radical is going to happen to you. I would argue, I agree. You have a much greater shot of something radical happening to you if you're out there, putting energy out into the universe. But hey, on Netflix, maybe a new show, a new movie was recommended to you, and you decide, what the hell? I'll watch it. I've never heard of it. I have no clue what it's about. You decide to watch it, and it's that movie that gives you some spark or some insight that you then say, you know what? I need to do something different. Whether that's in your relationship, whether that's in your career, whether that's in fitness, whatever it is, that could be the spark. But if you're
Mm.
not willing to embrace that and you're not willing to lean into that and use it as a catalyst for change, it's never going to happen.
Mm.
So that would be it. And then the last one is, and this is sort of like how the book is written, is that not only can you use these catalyst moments for yourself to change your life for the better, but you oftentimes can be the catalyst for others to change theirs. So I talk about how, you know, this in the end of the book, I talk actually multiple stories about hitchhiking and
Mm.
how hitchhiking has led to ripple effects for generations of people. So in the US, I talk about Ralph Nader and how a hitchhiking story that he was involved with has
Yes.
created tremendous change for society. In my own life, I was also hitchhiking. I'm not going to ruin the story, but I hitchhiked, and that had a significant change for my family and
Yeah.
generations of people who will come after me. And so just know that this is, to me, this is how real impact is made in the world. It's through these catalyst moments, it's through these happy accidents, and it's through embracing them in their entirety.
Yeah. I love that. Be aware, take stock, and lean into it, really. So,
Yes.
Adam, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. Where can people go to grab a copy of your book, or what's the best place for them to connect with you directly?
Yeah, book is on any retailer of your choice. So wherever you like to buy books online, you can find it there. Otherwise, adamtank.com. I have a contact me form on the website. If you want to get in touch, I'd love to hear from you or respond to every single person that fills out the form. So feel free to drop me a note there.
Awesome. We will put those links in the show notes. Adam, fascinating conversation. So great to chat with you today about luck. Uh, Highly suggest that people grab a copy of your book, Luck by Design, Adam Tank. And yeah, stay lucky, my friend.
Thank you. Likewise.
Hey, thanks for tuning into the Happy Accidents podcast. I hope you find these stories as intriguing and insightful as I do. But make sure you don't miss an episode. You can subscribe to my Accidental Solopreneur channel on YouTube and watch these episodes in video form, or subscribe to the Happy Accidents podcast on Apple and Spotify for your listening pleasure. Until next time, stay lucky, my friends.